You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. Combine going down in Indy this week. Josh Edwards writes about the NFL draft for CBSSports.com. Good enough to join us for a couple of minutes here. How are you, man?
Going pretty well, actually, on the way there now. So excited to begin the festivities tomorrow with some of the general managers and head coaches taking the stage.
I think probably the biggest news today is that Shedeur isn't going to work out. How do you feel about, I mean, that's not new, right? I mean, none of the top three guys last year did either. How do you feel about the guys that choose not to work out at the Combine?
Yeah, I'm not surprised because Cam Ward and Shedeur have kind of positioned themselves to be the top quarterbacks in this draft class. I know teams feel to varying degrees, about that statement. But I think what disappoints me the most is that I thought Shedeur was somebody that would probably try to make the most of his opportunities because now he's had the chance to compete at the Senior Bowl. He had the chance to compete and throw at the Combine. And I just thought with everything that we make about, the way that, he's gritty, he's tough, he's a coach's son. He's somebody that's always going to be able to handle the pressure and rise to the occasion. I was a little bit disappointed for that reason that he did not decide to throw at the Combine this week.
Is there a player, maybe a high-profile player, that jumps to the forefront? I want to say, hey, who's got the most to gain this week? Like, who comes to mind?
I think there's a few different ways to answer that. I will say Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M is a defensive lineman. He's 6'6", 290 pounds. He has played on the edge at Texas A&M, but I think he has the side to move inside as well. But he's expected to test really well, and where he's ultimately going to be taken in the draft is dependent upon testing well. Alabama linebacker Jihad Campbell is incredibly athletic. He's somebody that, with a strong performance, should solidify himself as a first-round pick as well. But the other way to answer it, I think, is looking at Michigan cornerback Will Johnson Jr., who, to me, was the top prospect coming into this college football season. But he dealt with a nagging injury that really hampered the way that he performed. And he was just kind of a shell of himself. So I think if he comes out and kind of gives a performance to remind people that he is one of the top talents in this draft class, then he's somebody that could certainly help himself as well.
Josh Edwards is with us. Get him on Twitter at Edwards CBS, talking some NFL Combine. There's 8 LSU guys that are going to be up there. Anyone in particular you're most interested to see this week?
There's a lot of them. I've been a big proponent of Savion Jones, the powerful edge rusher. I thought that he would be talked about more favorably than he has been to this point. I thought he fared well at the Senior Bowl. He's helped himself, and I'm kind of hoping that he's able to continue that in Indianapolis and solidify himself as a day 2, potentially top 50 pick. There's a lot. I mean, Braden Swinson, of course, I think he's sitting just outside of our top 100, but I think he deserves to be in that day 2 conversation pretty solidly as well. Will Campbell, there's going to be questions with his length, his foot speed, all that stuff, whether or not he's able to stay at left tackle, which I think he is capable of doing that. But some of the NFL teams are going to get that question answered this week. So I think LSU has a lot of guys with some stuff at stake this week, and I'm excited to see them come out on the other side of it.
Where do you stand on the Will Campbell length thing? It's something we've kind of talked about here, is kind of warning our audience, like the length of his arms is something that seems to be a bit of a concern.
I feel like we keep moving the threshold a little bit because at one point it was, well, you can't have sub 33-inch arms. And then he surpassed that, and now it's like, well, you really need to have greater than 34-inch arms. So I think the narrative has kind of been changed. It's kind of a disservice to him, but I think length is very important because it ultimately is a physical sport, and you're able to dictate the action a little bit more at the point of attack if you have those longer arms against the defensive lineman that most certainly will possess the type of length and quickness moving forward that you don't necessarily have as a left tackle. So It's important, but I think his testing at the Senior Bowl, having those 34-inch arms, I think was enough for me to feel comfortable projecting him as a left tackle. And if he doesn't stick there, then I still think you're upgrading your offensive line as you try to get the 5 best on the field.
Doesn't it seem kind of odd, Josh? I mean, I watched this guy play so dominant for 3 years in the best conference in college football, and we're talking about an inch on his arm? Like, is that really, mean, it's really that much of a determining factor?
It's crazy, but, those are the type of guardrails that teams put in place to make sure that they don't have a team full of outliers. There are scientific reasons. There is analysis that, corroborates what these teams are coming up with in terms of the length necessary at the position. There are certainly outliers of that conversation, and I think a lot of the ways that you're able to make up for a lack of length is just your technical aspects, foot speed, stuff like that. Because if you're a high IQ offensive lineman, you're able to neutralize the defensive lineman in other ways if maybe you don't have the length that teams covet. Because it's kind of like losing one of your senses. You become more heightened in other areas. So for an offensive lineman that maybe is not of ideal length, you have to find other ways to be successful. And, the guardrails are in place, but there's certainly going to be teams that look at him and say, we haven't taken chances on players that maybe don't fit those guardrails. So if we have 1 or 2 on our roster, that's not going to be a problem.
Interesting way to put it. Josh, the Saints head to Indy, obviously with a new coach and a new staff. I don't know how much you've paid attention to Kellen Moore, but is there anything specifically that would align with Kellen Moore that you think is worth watching this week in Indy with the Saints? I don't know if I'm asking that question the right way, but something maybe specific that Kellen Moore, his offense, his style, might be geared toward?
Well, I think solidifying the offensive line is going to be a priority first and foremost. I know the Saints have tried to do that in the recent years with, Trevor Penning and, last year with Fuaga. I think that's going to be a priority, just making sure that's in place because there were some injuries along the interior offensive line. He comes from Dallas and Philadelphia, where you not only had 5 quality starters across the board, but you also had playable depth in a lot of those roles as well. So I think he's going to want to make sure that he's comfortable with the 7 or 8 guys that he's taking into the season for the upcoming year. I don't think that running back is going to be the most important thing, even with what we saw from Saquon Barkley this year. I think he's probably going to look to get another complementary piece to Chris Olave there in the building as well, take some of the pressure off of him. Obviously, Olave was very vocal this past year in terms of his issues with his usage in the offense and the way that the team was built and stuff like that. So I think he probably would like to have somebody that's going to take the pressure off of Chris Olave. And then once you get those 2 things in place, then you can start worrying about the running back position and some other things. But I would say first and foremost, he's going to want to make sure the offensive line is correct.
Josh Edwards, CBS draft analyst. He's on Twitter at Edwards CBS. Hey, before you go, what is the best part and the worst part about the combine?
The walking is terrible.
I thought Indy was good. I thought Indy was walkable.
It's great. What I don't think a lot of people understand is that this time of year, it's not always the most friendly in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
I think, the gods are smiling down on us a little bit this week with a little bit more favorable weather, but you get down amidst some of those buildings, it's like a wind tunnel, and you have to walk from, wherever you're lodged to the convention center. It can definitely be brutal at times. There's a lot of people you want to speak with, still only a finite amount of time that you can do so. So that's a blessing and a curse, but I think at the end of the day, just being able to see a lot of these players in person and kind of put eyes on some of the, bias that you have coming into this event is ultimately what is the most beneficial, at least for us in the media.
Have a good week, man. We appreciate a couple minutes as always.
Yeah, of course. Anytime.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.